a harmonica, an ugly tie, and a spaghetti dinner. This has to be one of the greatest leadership stories of all times. It certainly is one of my favorites. This story has generational gaps. It has a liberating leader, and a liberating leader is somebody who knows how to properly give the right amount of support with the right amount of challenge. It has all of the obstacles that have to be overcome. And I think most importantly is the results of a great leader have to be there. It's my favorite story. You guys are really going to enjoy this. So George, our protagonist, is accidentally in charge of a recording studio. You see, his boss had retired and the company was going to shut down this recording studio. It wasn't very profitable. So George, with nothing to lose, took a risk. He decided to record something that wasn't being recorded at the time. He decided to record comedians. And with his sound studio, he had so much fun creating sound effects for these comedians and making records, and it was just enjoyable. There's a lot of endorphins in laughter, and I think that was part of it. He enjoyed laughter. He enjoyed funny people, and he enjoyed funny situations, and he was brilliant at creating hooks and these records that were so popular. Who would have thought that this would be so profitable? It saved the studio. It became very, very profitable, and George had cemented his role as the leader of the studio. But still, after about 12 years, he had yet to produce what was called a hit record. And he saw all the other studios do this over and over again. He felt like he was getting a lot of the rejects, and he really wanted to produce this hit record. So what happened was he received a lot of people in to pitch them groups and pitch them songs and pitch them ideas. And so this gentleman comes in, he pitches him this wonderful group that he thought was, and George listened to this and he heard something. He could hear something and he couldn't tell what it was. It was a harmonica. And George loved unique sounds. He was a bassoonist. He thought, I could record this. This would be kind of fun to record. But he talked to the pitchman and says, based upon this record, man, it's a hard no. But bring him around, I'll have a listen. Well, the band came in and he did have a listen. And when they set up, they brought the rattiest, nastiest equipment that he'd ever seen. They were a little bit out of tune. The drummer could not keep time. It was very difficult and challenging to listen to this group because George was used to listening to studio musicians who were really good. These guys weren't that good. And so after they get done and after they played their songs, they're used to playing live music. They've never been in a studio before, except for one time. George had this hard and difficult conversation with them, and he challenged them. And he said, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And he went on and on and on. And this group sat there and listened. And as a great leader does, he turned back to the group and says, is there anything that you don't like about my direction or about the studio or anything at all that you guys don't like? And one of the bandmates looked up and says, well, as a matter of fact, I don't like your tie. And George looked down at his tie and thought, wait a minute, this is one of my favorites. I picked this out this morning, but George completely didn't get the joke. But the bandmates and the engineers were all dying laughing. And so they cut up for a long time after that. And George thought, well, I could work with these young guys because they've got a great work ethic and they're fun to work with. But there was a generational gap. George was twice their age. George was a seasoned musician. He's used to working with very top professionals, and these guys were not it. So it was months later before they came back into the studio. And to George's surprise, they had a new drummer. He took their advice of getting rid of the drummer who couldn't keep time. This new drummer had better equipment. This new drummer was a much better musician, but George had already planned to have a studio musician or a studio drummer to cut this record. So the studio musician came in as the drummer. He played on this song, and they really got a good recording. In fact, it was a little surprising to George after he worked with him a little bit. So George did something else that was very unique as a leader. He took them all out for a spaghetti dinner. Now, that spaghetti dinner to the bandmates, that was unbelievable. They thought this was the greatest thing ever, that this leader, this great person, was taking them out and giving them support, which no one else had done. Now, George didn't know this, and what came out at the dinner or sometime later was that they had been turned down by every single studio in the area. George was the only one who would record them. And for him to take them out to a spaghetti dinner, they thought that was the best support that they could ever get. Now, that spaghetti dinner was support, and after the first recording, that was challenge. And that's how you liberate people. One of the interesting things I find is that the generational gap. George was thinking that these people should have this stuff, that this group should have this knowledge. They should know how to read music. They should be better musicians if they're going to be in a band. But they didn't. And so there was just a generational gap that didn't see eye to eye. And as George worked on it and became better and better understanding them, as a great leader does, man, the stuff that they put out was incredible. Now, George kind of became the fifth member of that band. And who was this wonderful George that I'm talking about? Of course, it was George Martin. And if you don't know who George Martin is, he was also known as the fifth Beatle. George Martin was the person who helped these guys grow into the musicians that they became. Now, George will tell you that he believes that the Beatles would have been great no matter what. And that's very humble. I don't know. George really put in a lot of time and effort. He recorded on several of the songs and gave countless hours. He knew when to roll up his sleeves and get involved with the boys. And he knew also when to hold back and to challenge them in certain areas. And that, my friend, is one of the best leadership stories out there. Now, if you want to find out more about this story, there's a great book called Maximum Volume. It goes through George's entire career, all the way up, I think, to 1966 with the Beatles, and then there's another book after that. But it talks about him recording the comedians. Peter Sellers was the comedian that was really, really popular, and then all of the other people that he worked with. And of course, Brian Epstein was the pitch man who came in with the record that the Beatles spent $5 whole recording, or £5 whole. So I hope you enjoyed the story. If you want to become a better leader, just reach out to me and I can put you in touch with the right type of support and challenge to help you become a really great leader. Thanks. That's all for today.